When you think of America's most lawless cities, some usual suspects probably come to mind. Chicago, St. Louis, Oakland. One you might not think of immediately, but probably should, is Baltimore. Not just because Baltimore has, at times in recent years, far exceeded the crime rates in those other cities. In 2017, Baltimore more than doubled Chicago's per capita murder rate, for example. But because in Baltimore, more often than not, there isn't justice either. Recently, a 10-year Washington Post analysis found that 65% of Baltimore murder cases went unsolved. So not only do they kill you, but they get away with it too. That's the Baltimore way. It's a tradition that Ray Lewis really started. And they've tried everything in Baltimore to reverse those statistics. The state has passed ever stricter gun laws, and shockingly, it turns out those willing to kill have often been willing to use illegal weapons to do it. They tried defunding the police, but it turns out cutting police overtime hasn't helped to solve the mysteries, and cutting the mounted unit hasn't produced results either. They just abruptly cut off feed and medical care to their stable of horses, as though that has anything to do with anything. Hay is for horses. Except in Baltimore, where there's no hay for the horses because the cops are racist. And absolutely stumped at the local level with a revolving door of corrupt city leadership, Baltimore has even tried passing it off to the feds, entering into an agreement with the Justice Department after the death of Freddie Gray to let the federal government tell Baltimore how to clean up its racist police department and maybe even get the crime rates down if they can ever get around to it. But it hasn't worked out. As police arrested fewer people, the murder problem only worsened, which leaves Baltimore leadership a challenging choice. They could admit defeat and return to the dated philosophy of actually arresting criminals for crime, or they could continue with this deadly experimentation in new and creative ways to surrender to criminals. And there's really only one progressive option there, of course, but the trouble is, how do you surrender any more than letting people get away with murder? I guess you got to go beyond surrender. You got to go with appeasement. You got to go with reward, even. And so the idea is actually being considered, hey, what if instead of punishing killers, we try paying them not to kill instead? I wish I was sensationalizing that characterization, but here's the local news story.
Community activist is actually pushing a bold strategy to reduce murders in the city. Pay people not to kill.
I've talked to these people. I've seen the shooters. It's a small city. I know who the hustlers are.
His idea, pay killers to stop killing.
Tyree Moorhead says the main driver of Baltimore's 300-plus murders a year is money. So why not give the killers a salary?
Because they're not providing a service? That's why not give them a salary. Because not killing people is not a job? That's why not give them a salary. Hey, what do you do for work? Oh, I refrain from murder. That's not a career. That's just a moral baseline. And paying you not to commit crime against me isn't a consensual exchange. That's extortion. Demanding money to stop abusing people is criminal thuggery in any other context, whether the government's doing it or not. This activist is Tyree Moorhead, himself a convicted murderer who spent 18 years in prison and is now trying to reform the streets. He's pushing this idea now after his last creative endeavor hasn't produced results. He tried marking no murder zones with graffiti throughout the city.
If you don't know his name, drive through the city, you'll see his mark. He recognizes even this hasn't slowed Baltimore's bloodshed. No shoot zones, sidewalks, street side, sacred space. Where after murder, no more killing here.
Yeah, have a little respect. Someone just got killed here, so give this spot a little bit of a murder break and take your killing over to the next block, please.
I can relate to the shooters. Guess what they want? They want money.
Oh, well, guess what I want? That awesome jean jacket of yours. Hand it over. It would really toughen up my look beyond the flannel. But just because I want it doesn't mean I get to take it from you through threats or force. And if I did, that would be theft. Just because somebody wants something doesn't mean that they're justified in taking it or that we'd be wise to give it to them. That's the obvious pushback against this idea. But instead, his fellow activists are worried that this plan will just make it easier for would-be killers to get guns.
But he doesn't believe paying criminals is the way. Savings in lives limited, he says, when guns are still so accessible.
It could make it easier for people to get their hands on guns because they now have an influx of a different level of cash.
Oh, so criminals will still find ways to commit crimes if that's what they're intent on. That's an interesting premise to work with. How is it that these criminals will still acquire these guns even after you've already enacted every piece of gun control that David Hogg could ever dream of on his good pillow. An assault weapons ban, mandatory background checks on private transfer, a red flag law for confiscation, no high-capacity mags, a state permit requirement to even buy a handgun, and a registry with the state when you do. These are all present in Maryland. And you're telling me all that's necessary for a criminal to get around all that legal thicket is just a mind intent on doing so and a small sum of cash in the pocket. But yeah, I'm sure the latest legal loophole that your governor just closed is finally the one that's going to get this problem solved. That's been the problem the whole time. All these criminals are taking their please don't murder bucks to gun shows to buy long guns. Watch the murder rate finally plummet in Baltimore now. These people are like addicts. Just one more law. Just one more law. Just one more law. Except at least the addicts actually get their high. These junkies don't even get the fix they're chasing. And of course, I'm not surprised that cracking down on everyone but the killers is a repeatedly failing strategy, but I am surprised that this idea isn't original. It's actually borrowed from a San Francisco suburb.
But it's been tried before. Richmond, California, tracking the cities most likely to shoot and get shot and giving them cash. Saw its lowest murder rate in over 30 years.
This program was profiled by CNN in 2016. The idea is that the city hires some mentors, aka reformed criminals, to reach out to murder suspects who haven't been arrested due to insufficient evidence, and put them through a reform program that ends with up to $1,000 monthly stipends for successful completion. The story credits the program for a drop in murder in Richmond, but a few things. First, murder has dropped in the broader Bay Area over the same time frame, as well as nationally, and it's not as though this program had massive outreach or massive success with its participants. As of this 2016 story, 68 potential murderers participated in this Richmond program. One of them went on to kill somebody anyway. 12 others have been convicted of illegal firearm possession, and 8 more were suspects in shootings. But hey, 94% are still alive. That's pretty good, right? No, it isn't. Being alive wasn't the standard. Not killing people was the standard, and it's a pretty mixed bag of results on that issue. Well, yeah, but these are troubled youth, the program organizers say. These are people who only know the government through law enforcement.
These are the young men who are isolated, idle, enraged, and all they have access to from government today is law enforcement.
That's not a nightmare. That's the dream. That's all anyone should have access to from the government. That's government's entire and only purpose, securing and protecting your rights through a structure of law. Government is not a coach. Government is not a caretaker. Government doesn't give you an allowance for being a good boy. Those are nanny jobs. And the government is not a nanny. Government is a referee. And so your isolation and your idleness and your rage, those all might be bad things, but those are not government fixes. Those are fixes for you and your family and your community, not the supposed loving hand of the state. And this guy says all they have access to is law enforcement, as though that's ominous. No, that's the design. And he frames this program as though it's some obviously great deal. Yeah, sure, it seems counterintuitive to pay them not to kill you, but think of the cost of not doing it.
After 6 months of their 18-month fellowship, these young men become eligible for a $1,000 a month stipend. That's nothing compared to the cost of gun violence.
Well, sure, you might not like being robbed, but how about being murdered? I bet you'd hate that way more. How about neither? How about just enabling citizens to defend themselves against such aggression and actually punishing those who commit it? Because stealing from people to preempt the crime of others isn't actually ending crime. It's just additional crime. It's just substituting one crime for another at best. And as this Richmond program demonstrated, you often get both anyway. But the mistake is probably mine for believing that this idea actually working is even the goal in the first place. The Baltimore activist says there is nothing you can do to stop the killing, this idea included.
I can't stop the shootings. No one in this world has proven to stop the shootings, not even the church. But what we can do is put them in compliance.
Well, if you can't stop the shootings, then the shooters won't be compliant. And if you pay them not to do it, that doesn't make the shootings compliant either. The only way to make the shootings compliant is just to legalize murder. And that's probably where this is headed. Honestly, I can see Baltimore getting its crime rate down to 0 simply by rewriting the definitions of crime long before I can ever see them actually cracking down on those who commit it. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler. It's back. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.